Welcome to Conversations with E. I'm Esther, founder and CEO of Mind Myself, and it is my great pleasure to welcome our guest today, Sherry Strong. Welcome, Sherry.
Thank you for having me, Esther. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to our time chatting.
Fantastic, me too. These are some of the best conversations of my life when I'm talking about real things and uh, things that people are passionate about, and they get to share those with other people in the world. So, and I know that you're passionate about what you do for sure.
Absolutely.
So, Sherry, tell us a little bit about yourself and what brought you to your work, which we're going to be exploring a little bit today.
Yeah, so I really focus on right now all the work that I've been doing over the past studying 40 years, working 30 plus years, helping people develop a healthier relationship with food, their body, and the planet. And I basically, right now, I'm focusing on beating sugar addiction and junk food addiction
Oh,
because I do identify when it comes to the food piece, it is the most significant and important piece we need to get handled. And a lot of people don't have it handled, even if they might look on the outside like they do, right? So I had a background, I was a chef working in restaurants. I was an award-winning chef. I had people offer, would you like your own restaurant? We'll back you in it. And I was like, nope, want my own life. So I started a cooking school, holistic cooking school. I was living in Melbourne, Australia at the time. I lived there for 22 years. And that cooking school led to working with dietitians and doctors who loved referring clients to me because I was teaching people how to eat low fat, quick and easy meals that didn't have any of the low fat, no fat, fake fat, low sugar, no sugar, fake sugar, garbage in it and chemicals, right?
yeah.
And so they actually, fortunately, they were both switched on that way. A lot of doctors and dietitians aren't, but they were way ahead of their time. And that led me to becoming more interested in nutrition. I'd had my own experiences with food, severe depression from sugar consumption as a teenager. Definitely had an issue with obesity. At that time, I was actually twice my size. So I was teaching these low-fat, quick and easy meals, and people were probably thinking, does she eat any of this food, or just maybe she eats all of it? I don't know. And not long before that, I really was struggling with sugar addiction. I was starting off the morning with half a liter of Sara Lee ultra chocolate ice cream, and then freebasing cake and donuts and anything sugary until I went to bed that night. I thought I was sleeping well, but essentially I was in a sugar coma, and I woke up tired even after 8 to 10 hours, needing what I felt more sleep. But what I really needed was to clean up. And as I started to do that, as I started to teach people how to eat, not just food that tasted good, that was definitely one of my talents, but food that was actually good for them and their body, I started to get healthier. And when I got healthier, I started to really take it on with a gusto, as they would say. Um, and I was invited to be part of the Nutrition Australia board. I became the Victorian chair of Nutrition Australia, I became the president of Slow Food. I sat on boards that consulted to the Australian government on public health policy. And I spoke at conferences, dietitians conferences, and things like that. And I could actually see that the whole system, just like the pharmaceutical system runs medical schools, the food industry runs nutrition, programs and dietetics programs at universities. And I started studying at university. I quickly saw that it was a sham. Like, I'd be sitting through lectures on dairy, and the professor actually used slides from the Dairy Corporation, and they didn't even bother removing the logo in the bottom right-hand corner. And I'm looking around like the class going, does anyone see a massive conflict of interest here? And when I would write papers on things where I know I did thorough, excellent research. If it wasn't the university's narrative that I was sticking to, I literally would get lines through my papers, right? And this is in the day when we submitted papers, typed, sometimes handwritten, right? They didn't even bother to look at the notes or the research. It was just, this is not what we believe, and don't even go there. And I got the message really quickly, and I thought, I'm going to have to pay for a degree that I'm going to have to lie or go against my conscience to do that. And I left. I was like, I'm not paying for this crap, this propaganda. And I went on a journey to actually figure out how we're meant to eat as the human species. And though I didn't have the words for it then, I asked for guidance and direction to help me understand. And I got what I call downloads. And at first I was so excited with them, and then I worked them and developed them. I kind of view the philosophies I teach as children. I'm not responsible for that child. It came through me, but I was responsible for raising it and molding it and guiding it, and helping it see a life in the world. And those philosophies, on top of working with clients, showing them how to eat and make it taste good, and that it was healthy, nourishing, then I started to help them work on the mind piece of understanding how it is we're meant to eat as the human species. The philosophical approach has been a life changer for me because I knew diets didn't work. And
Mm.
one of the reasons diets don't work is because most people don't have a not knowing what to eat issue. It does happen. But even when you find out what to eat, the bigger problem is it's drug addiction, not food addiction. Like the foods that we're making right now are made like drugs. And so we have drug addiction. And trying to solve that problem with a diet plan is like going down to the downtown east side and saying, that heroin, it's not good for you. This apple is much better. You're going to feel so much better if you just stick to this, healthy diet. Like it's absurd to think that that's going to solve the problem. It doesn't. So I started developing these philosophies. I started teaching classes, and then I started speaking. I was a what you would call a celebrity chef nutritionist in Australia. Had television, shows. I was guest on shows. I wrote for magazines, and was on the speaking circuit. I did lifestyle makeovers. So wealthy, high net worth individuals would hire me to basically take their life, their kitchen, in some cases, their chefs, and teach them how to set up the house and their kitchen so it supported them reversing chronic lifestyle conditions. Some Canadians you might know about that I, can disclose, or Theo Fleury. I helped him reverse Crohn's disease
Mm.
for the time I worked with him. And Brett Wilson when he was going through his second phase of cancer. And then there's a bunch of others I've worked with, but I have NDAs that I don't disclose their
Right.
um, identity for obvious reasons. So I came back to Canada in 2011, started teaching at the Institute of Holistic Nutrition, the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, and started a holistic cooking school in Hastings, near Hastings in Vancouver. And then I started to write my book, Return to Food, Life-Changing Anti-Diet, which I now have rebranded, retitled Return to Food, How Going Back is the Way Forward. Um, yeah, and so since then I've been speaking and teaching, and I started a program called Sweet Freedom, which helps people with all the pieces that I learned that contribute to helping with the food and sugar addiction piece, because it's not about dieting, although we do include amazing recipes and all that kind of stuff. And then in 2020, when the lockdowns were happening, my parents were due to go into a nursing home because my mother was uh, poisoned by a fluoroquinolone antibiotic, and she almost died. She went into heart, kidney, and liver failure. She was completely disabled the last 8 years of her life. And in 2020, my dad could no longer do all the care for her. So I moved from Vancouver to northern Alberta, didn't know a soul in my area, found a house, moved them in with me, and proceeded to be their full-time carer, and just nourished and loved them and, honored them for the last 3.5 years of their life. And they passed last year, 5 months to the day of each other. And so now I'm back to doing the work that one of the things, my mother was my biggest fan. She would attend everything and support everything. And so I know I'm doing the work that she was anxious and eager and proud of me to do.
Uh, what a story, Sherry. I'm sure there's so much more to it, and we'll keep it there for today. But wow, thank you for sharing your vulnerability too. That's so key when we're talking about foundational elements of our human thriving.
Yeah.
Vulnerability is a part of that too. I that's one of my values too.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about sugar. Why
Yeah.
is sugar such a bad thing? You've alluded to it a few times. Why?
Yeah.
Tastes so
Well,
good.
yeah, in nature, it's perfect, but we bastardized nature. And so we're no longer eating natural sugars. We're not even eating natural sugars naturally. If you're eating tropical fruits in your smoothie every day in the winter, that's not a natural way of eating, right?
Mm.
Especially here in northern Alberta, and what they do to the fruit to get it there and how they bump it up with sugars. But So even those sugars are not as destructive as most of the sugars that we're eating now. And what we have done over the years is we've taken sugar in its natural state, which is not highly addictive, but it's highly compelling to the human body. It gives us a lot of energy. It looks beautiful. It's got tons of, uh, healing properties in it, phytonutrients, macro and micronutrients, all that kind of stuff. And we have taken it and we've just started to, at every stage of nature, denature the process, from growing it with chemicals and synthetic fertilizers, chemical pesticides, dipping it in things to ship it overseas, to controlled atmosphere, storage and, artificial ripening. Some of the fruits that we're eating are like 3 and 4 years old. They've managed to master keeping things in cold storage without the actual fruit breaking down.
Mm.
And it's often why you'll eat something thinking, I'm being healthy, and there's no true pleasure response apart from sweetness, So that's even the natural sugars, but we've gone beyond that. And we've started to process sugars and starches and oils and salts, grains, the same way we take opium sap and turn it into heroin. Okay.
Mm.
Same way we take coca leaves and turn it into cocaine. So opium sap in its natural state is not highly addictive or toxic. It does give you a dopamine hit, but just like, a cup of coffee does, um, gives you, that kind of sensation of being, a pleasure sensation or an addiction sensation. But once you start to cook anything in nature, you denature it. And my theory is that when you denature something, the body not only can handle more of it, because it's in a sense that it's pre-digested through the cooking process, but the nutrient levels are diminished. So the body says, feed me more because I'm not getting enough. And I think part of the addiction process is the body actually trying to get more nutrients. Okay. Not to mention, sugar highs and lows and things like that. But then what happens with the opium sap is as they cook it and remove macro and micronutrients and make a paste and cook it down, it becomes addictive and toxic to the body in large amounts, right? In amounts you would never consume if you had to make it yourself in nature. If you wanted to become an opium addict in nature, that would be your full-time job. So you couldn't eat, right? And then they managed, to take opium and process it further until you end up with something that is pure, white, and clear with all the macro and micronutrients removed, and it becomes highly addictive and toxic to the body, in unnatural or large amounts. Same thing happens with sugar, but with sugar lights up the dopamine receptors in the brain 8 times more than cocaine.
Wow.
Yeah. So we start off with something that's perfectly natural, and we denature it. And the further something is away from its natural state, the more destructive it is to the body, and often the more addictive it is. And we do that with oils, salts, grains, and chemicals, which our food is full of. So it's a very complex problem. And now the bigger thing is that sugar is everywhere. It's literally in everything. Like dried fruit, they're putting refined sugar into dried fruit with seed oils covering it, right?
Yes.
So it's if we actually had a conscious, critically thinking mind, we would say that behavior is insanity. And it's one of those things, like many things we think from the outside is insane, but when you see the bigger game plan, it makes total sense when you're trying to create a population of people who are sick, weak, and controllable, right? Dumb them down, numb them with pain, and then keep them in the addiction cycle. And you can make them sick, so then you've got another industry that totally benefits from it. So the insanity from the outside is a very sane but evil plan for humans.
Right. And even if somebody hasn't gone down the pathways that you have, maybe doesn't even necessarily believe in some of those things,
Yeah.
they can't deny because it's everywhere. Sugar is addictive and it's really hard to resist, especially as you say, it's in pretty much everything prepared that we eat. And it's really important to know that and to be able to read labels and make choices, right?
And Esther, it's not even hidden. So there's books written on it, fat, salt, and sugar. There's plenty of documents about the collusion of the sugar industry and the pharmaceutical industry. So it's not a conspiracy theory. It's just happening and it's business.
I believe you. I'm just
Yeah,
saying there are some people who haven't gone down these
I
trails,
know.
and absolutely. And it's so important to begin looking there, just opening the doors a little bit and stepping inside, because there's so much going on, just so much going on. And we're just talking about sugar today. So
Yeah,
we'll
we're
focus on,
talking about sugar and junk food.
yeah, exactly. You've branded yourself a food philosopher. So, what is your philosophy of food? I think you've mentioned some of it, but let's take a little deeper dive.
Yeah, sure. So the first philosophy that I taught that I have no ego in saying it's genius because I believe I downloaded it. I just the mothers. Like if you have a genius child, you can't take credit for that. They're all born geniuses, right? So this idea is nature's principle. And over the years, I've had people just come back to me and say, "Oh my goodness, this literally changed my life when I got it." And I want to teach everyone kind of because it's so simple. It's one of those things that it's like an axiom, a universal truth, but we've forgotten about it. And when people hear it and understand it, it's encoded in our DNA. So if you haven't been totally brainwashed into the processed food system, it rings true. And a lot of people who live off the land, and farmers, it's like, duh, yeah, permaculturists, it makes sense. So nature's principle is nature tells us what to eat and the quantities to eat it and by how easily it's obtained in nature. So that which is most abundant, we're meant to have most of. It's like food for dummies our creator gave us, right? If it's harder to obtain in nature, so it's more scarce, we're given stronger physiological desires to work harder for it. So it creates the balance. So if something has a lot of, it's high energy food, we have to spend energy in the process of procuring it, but we have strong desires. So we'll actually export that energy, right? And the third area is if you cannot get it in nature, not only is it unnecessary for humans and likely harmful to humans and the planet, right? So the processing of all of that. And unfortunately, the bulk of what we're eating right now is in that third area. And when we get into that third area of you couldn't make it in nature, and we don't need it, and it's harmful to the body, it literally does dumb us down. Like there's videos I can show you of when they feed lab rats a sad, the standard American diet for 30 days, they literally develop forms of dementia where they could do the task in 7 seconds will take them like 45 seconds. Okay. And they forget and those kinds of things. So that's the third area. Now I'm going to go back to the first area, that which is most abundant in nature, just to help people start to understand that air is our most abundant nutrient in the planet. Can't survive seconds without it. That's indisputable. Water is our second most abundant nutrient, covers 70% of the planet, and composite your body is 70% water, right? And then vegetation would be the next most bioavailable, depending on where you are in the earth and the bulk of the earth, right? In the places that are pleasurably habitable. Okay, so not in the Arctic where their traditional diet was 80% seal blubber, not a place I want to live from a
Oh,
chef's perspective, right? So the other piece is that we have this hierarchy. We also have a way of understanding how we're meant to eat by just actually living in accordance with nature if you had to feed yourself. So if I gave you the choice and you had to feed your family and you were hungry, you were in a natural environment, and I gave you a choice between an apple seed and a broccoli seed, or say a bunch of broccoli seeds and a bunch of apple seeds, and you wanted to feed your family, which one would you choose?
that's a tough one, because my my brain's getting in the way. Probably the apple, because it's more abundant and it would grow a tree and I would have a more regular supply of it.
Okay, so I'm telling you from a seed, how long would it take you to grow some apples?
Oh, a longer time. So
Yeah,
broccoli closer.
yeah. And even if you have a well-established apple tree,
Mhm.
what grows in the season first?
The broccoli.
Yeah. And it can replenish through that time. Even when an apple grows to maturity, nature says don't eat it then, right? Have you ever eaten an apple before it's ripe?
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah, it's horrible, isn't it?
yeah.
Okay. It's nature's way of saying, wait, eat this, harvest, do all this work, procure. and you can, preserve it. There's lots of ways to preserve it and that kind of thing. And then that gives you this energy store, this burst of energy, like storage of energy to carry you through the winter, right? So we have even lost a very basic understanding of how we're meant to eat. And it's because we don't grow most of our own food. And even if we do grow, for most of us, it's kind of like a vanity project. Like, oh, I grow my own tomatoes, like we're not subsisting and living off of what we're eating. So there's very few people who really understand and get that, and then in the natural cycles. And so nature's principle is about helping us remind our DNA of how we were meant to eat. Now, I will say one caveat, because a lot of people say, well, what about meat? And a lot of people will say that, that vegetables are bad because they contain phytonutrients, and phytonutrients have they have like phytochemicals that are designed within the plant to protect it against predators. But those phytonutrients also have health properties in it too. So they can have properties that will offend predators, but they also have healthful properties. So that's where nature actually gave us a variety of things to eat seasonally. So we weren't eating blueberries 365 days, a cup in our smoothie. Like that's not natural eating, right?
Right.
And although that is preferable to the sad diet and, a lot of, processed food eating, one of the things with nature's principle and re-educating your mind about how the human species is meant to eat is you then begin to understand a way of knowing that gets into here rather than eating from here, which is, the diet mentality. Like I work with people all the time and I say, so um, I was talking to a client today and she was weighing up going on a detox diet versus working with me. And I said, you've done this before, haven't you? A lot of time, all the time. Yeah. How many diets? I can't count how many diets. Does it work? No. So, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again. And it's because, and she knew it. The great thing to her credit is she understood it wasn't because she didn't know what to eat. She actually recognized, particularly through our time chatting, that it was a drug issue and it was also emotionally driven. So, yeah, I think I went over answering your question.
Oh, no, I love it. And could you go back to all three and give some examples? You've given the apple broccoli, but
Yeah.
could you give some examples of all three? Very clear, a number of examples of all three of those.
Yeah. So it's really, and it really ties into seasonal local organic eating. So what's available in your area. And one of the things I will say, I think I got off track, is the human body is not designed to just eat one diet. It's not designed to eat the same food 365 days a year. It's designed to eat according to its environment. And we don't grow broccoli 365 days a year or apples, right? The seasons were given to us. The organic, we were designed to eat food as it came through nature, not genetically modified or put toxic chemicals on it. And,
Yeah.
you can't separate the toxic chemicals from the plant once it's grown that way. So one of the examples with, the harder to come by is animals. Like, and this actually works. There's plenty of natural uh, cultures that ate primarily plant foods. A lot of people think hunter-gatherers were meat eaters solely, but when you go into the literature of historically and anthropologically, they ate 10 to 15 plant species to every animal species. And then they ate the animal species in a hierarchy of what was most bioavailable, like readily available and easier to kill. So I use the example of chicken or the egg. And this goes into a concept I teach called the consumption concept. If I'm to ask the average Canadian or American what they would prefer for dinner tonight if they were at a restaurant, would they choose an omelet or chicken? What would you say that most people would choose?
Chicken.
Yeah. And there's a reason, like meat is much more addictive, like the flesh of an animal that's had time to grow up and develop hormones and all those kinds of things. It's more addictive than the chicken just on its own, the egg, sorry, on its own. But given the same response in nature, and you had to go and source an egg from a chicken and make an omelet from it, or you had to catch, kill, pluck, bleed, disembowel, cook, take all the feathers, all that stuff for dinner, given the same choice and recognizing that that chicken, you've now taken away a source of eggs, what do you think most people would choose?
Probably go return to the egg.
Yeah. Yeah. So by not actually sourcing our own food and animals, we have disconnected
Yep.
from one, a natural relationship with something that you're taking its life. Okay. Two, how that animal is treated while it is alive. For the most part, people are eating supermarket, meats. And
Hmm.
none of those meats are really genuinely treated well. Even if they say grass fed, often they're just grass finished and they eat a crappy diet for most of their life. They just get cleaned up before they go to slaughter. So I'm an omnivore. I'm not preaching one way or the other. I'm just trying to help people understand that we
Hmm.
make very different decisions if we have to source food on our own. So that's a harder to come by. And same with fruits, that's harder to come by, right? So we have to work harder. There's the hunt, the gathering, there's work involved in actually getting those things. And there's a corresponding, like the amount of work that you do to actually gather it, you work off. So that's why you never see obesity in
Right.
traditional indigenous, populations or just populations who solely lived off the land, right? The
Mhm.
the only person you would see would be obese was the king or the nobility because they had lots of people doing it for them. They weren't sourcing their own food.
Right.
And then, of course, the last area, we have a million examples. You just have to go through a drive-through, you know, go to the candy aisle, go to well, even the vegan aisle. Like there's a lot of stuff there you could not possibly make in nature. And it has
Yes.
a very heavy imprint on the planet there. So I have friends who are raw food vegans. When they were in their she was in her late 60s, he was in his early 70s. They're serious raw food vegan. They ran barefoot, in the Vibrams around Australia. They did 366 marathons in 366 days.
Wow.
And they're now in their 70s and 80s, and they still run like 14, 15Ks a day. They maintain a property. They teach, workshops and run seminars on their property, and they grow all their own food. So when people talk about the weak vegans, I like to use that example because I've seen unhealthy vegans and I've seen unhealthy carnivores and
Yeah,
omnivores. There's a healthy way of doing it and an unhealthy way.
absolutely. And we could talk about that for another hour or
Yeah.
two or five. So, your philosophical approach, and you've shared a lovely microcosm of it. What makes your approach and your work stand out from the millions of diet options or sugar options around in the world of helping people deal with that?
Yeah. So I often say, I may have even said it already, that when I go into a room, I'm pretty confident no one in the room has thought more about food than me. Like from all aspects, from the nutrition side, from the chef side, from the mental, the kind of the psychological side, from the anthropological side, and understanding the psychology and also the spirituality around food and our eating. And so people get into my program and a lot of people will come into the program and they love the recipes, they love the meal plans, shopping lists, all that kind of stuff. But 4 weeks into the program, they're like, hey, this isn't a diet program, this is a self-love program, right? So it's helping people return to this place that, I think is deep within us, but our society is conditioning out of ourselves. And we choose to eat well for how and what it's doing on the inside, not for weight loss. Weight loss can become a benefit for some people. Some people don't lose weight. Some people actually gain weight because they need to, right? Because their body's actually finding the right place. But I have an anti-diet approach and we don't weigh anything. We don't measure anything. We just start eating naturally and teaching people how to eat naturally according to what's available in their area, what works within their environment and family. Because a lot of people will say to me, Sherry, I just tell me what you eat and I'll do that. And I was like, you won't eat like me, right? Like I've developed my way of eating that actually works for me and makes me feel good, and gives me all the things that I love, but still creates balance in my body because I personally believe chocolate is God's way of saying he loves us and wants us to be happy. And I'd rather live to 100 with chocolate than 120 because life without chocolate would probably feel
Here, here.
better, right? And
Yeah.
I'm that way about coffee too. But there's a way that I have chocolate. There's the kind of chocolate that I have. There's the kind of coffee that I have. There's the frequency that I have of it that actually works within my body. And that's taken me years to figure out. People want to lose the weight quickly because they just see this extra as, unwanted, when there's actually really good reasons that you have excess fat on your body. And the process of excavating that permanently, like to actually find the right place for you and your body, it's a process, and it depends on how much, you have tied up around this. It can be impacted by trauma, it can be impacted by emotions and stress. And part of it can just be pure ignorance, but by and large, the people who come to me know that it's not a diet issue. It's deeper than that. And so it goes comprehensively into that. It's not therapy. It's just doing the work of uncovering it and starting to make what was unconscious conscious, and starting to understand that you can actually change your mind and your beliefs about it to make different decisions that empower you.
I love that. And we're so, at least in North America, I can't comment on other places of the world really intelligently, but we're conditioned. Oh, you feel bad. This ice cream or this chocolate bar, not the good kind, but even if it tastes good, this is what you treat yourself with. Have a treat. But it's really not about self-love. And I just so appreciate you saying that, and that's the focus. And it's less about the size you are and more about, let's be healthy, what's happening inside, how do we love ourselves, what does that actually mean? And if that's an integral part of your process, which I haven't gone through,
Mhm.
I've seen some of your fabulous recipes, but I haven't gone through your process. So what a delight, what a transformation, what an opportunity for people to experience that.
Yeah, and I really do say to people, I don't care about your weight. Like if you don't lose weight in this program, I don't have a problem with that. If you keep doing this, your body will find its right place and its healthy place. But my concern is more what's going on inside you, in your gut, in your heart, in your mind. That's the true transformation. And one of the things I will tell you around that that's really important for people to understand, Esther, is years ago, one of the few dietitians I've come across in my life that I have true respect for, her name was Dr. Rosemary Stanton in Australia. And I interviewed her when I was actually in studying at university, and just she's actually received death threats for basically just telling the truth about processed food, and she didn't take money from companies that she could have, over the years she could have got millions of dollars to do it. Anyway, she was harping on about fat people, and overweight people, obese people, and the problem and stuff like that. And I just said to her, I said, Rosemary, when you did your rounds in hospital, would you not agree that there's just as many thin people in there as there is obese people? And she's like, yeah. You see, obese people are easily identified, but I can tell you from my work, you can be just as unhealthy in a thin body as you can in an overweight body. And something that's really important in a time where we are facing environmental toxins in literally air, water, land, food, whatever. The body actually doesn't just create fat cells because of excess energy that we're consuming. The body actually creates excess fat cells to store toxins away from the vital organs. So if you're injecting yourself or you're consuming toxic substances, as a lot of, fitness people will do, and you've got 1 to 3% body fat, there's nowhere else for those toxins to go except your vital organs.
Right.
And so there is a reason. The body does everything for a reason, but there's a way of hijacking our nature and, using misinformation to confuse people to say a cold is something you catch. Because isn't that great? Because you can actually say, well, I caught it. I didn't do anything to actually create this detoxification process my body is brilliantly doing. And then I can actually buy some drugs that will stop the symptoms from happening and stop the cleansing from happening. And then I get sick and there's new drugs you can sell me, right? So my concern is what's going on the inside. The health of your body, the health of your heart, and the health of your mind, and the health of your spirit. And that's what we work on in the program.
Wonderful. Do you have any fears around this work that you do?
You mean by telling the truth?
Sure. What's your fear? Yeah.
Or did you mean something else? Like, was there any,
I
no?
don't know. It's just,
Just
is there,
came up?
yeah, is there generally anything that you're afraid of around doing this work?
Well, the natural thing of the desire to serve people is not being able to reach people and really serve them. Like, we keep our groups relatively small, so I can actually do that. But we do have a goal of, reaching a lot of people, and I can't do that on my own. So I want to be able to train people to actually do that. And I really want to work in First Nations groups as well. I just sent out some contacts today to say I want to actually work in First Nations group where I'm teaching them to remember what they knew in their natural culture, and then teaching them how to create a living, teaching their community
Mhm.
how to go back and remember, how going back is the way forward. Because a lot of, there's been a lot of misinformation in Indigenous communities. Like a lot of people think bannock is a traditional food. It's actually an adaptation from the white man's poison. I refer to the white man's white poisons, right? And I'm white, so I'm not white bashing. It's just the reality is colonials were white. They brought over all this white food that was devoid of nutrition. And so you've got flour, white sugar, white salt, white oils that they, make the bannock in. And it's a donut, basically.
Yeah,
It's
they're
not
delicious,
healthy.
but oh my gosh, no, they don't.
Exactly,
They don't feel
exactly.
good. Yeah, yeah.
And then there becomes this sentimental attachment to, oh, my grandma made bannock, for me, and they associate that with love, and we all cultures have versions of that. But if you go back to the fears that I have, it's imposter syndrome. It's not being good enough. And, after 40 years of studying, and I still continue to study, and 30 years of working with clients, it might seem absurd. But I refer to it as the inches. I'm not good enough or it's not good enough. And because it's a universal experience with humans, I believe it's an evolutionary tool. It's a survival tool, right? The I'm not good enough as a mother makes you strive to be a better mother and take care of your children, right? The I'm not good enough as a person often motivates us to evolve and become better.
Hmm. Unless we're enclosed in it and we can't see beyond it, but that's a
Yeah.
whole.
And it's like every evolutionary tool, it can be used for our betterment or against us, like the love of sugar, or the love of convenience. In nature, our love of convenience fed us, right? Finding the easiest, quickest route to get those berries, and hunting that animal or whatever meant that we didn't go hungry. But in the
Yeah,
supermarket, that same evolutionary tool works absolutely against us.
yeah.
And food companies know that. They hijack our natural inclination for the desire of sweet, salt, and fat,
Hmm.
and they make it super addictive and make tools that are meant for us in nature to survive. They've used it against us.
Absolutely. And we could have a whole conversation around marketing in the food industry, which perhaps we'll do on another occasion.
Okay. Yeah.
As someone who has been twice your size, what is something that you would like to leave and had such a hard time giving up sugar, this high
Mhm.
addictive substance? What is something you want to leave your listener with today?
Yeah. There was a time, and just to clarify, I wasn't 10'4". Okay. So haven't had a massive height reduction, right? Um, I was starting in the morning with that ice cream and donuts and all that kind of thing, and it was like an addict. I was truly an addict. I couldn't go anywhere where there wasn't food in my bag or, my car or anywhere. Like and while I was eating, I was thinking about the next thing. So I was truly an addict, and I thought sugar was stronger than me.
Hmm.
I thought the food was stronger than me. And I couldn't see my way out. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And I knew a diet was not going to work. Like I just knew that for me. And since working with thousands of people, I know that it doesn't on its own. Like the physics of it work.
Yeah.
And that's great if you don't have an emotional relationship with food or you have all your trauma handled, right? But if you have those things, a diet's not going to be the answer. Or what can happen is you become like a dry drunk. So the dry drunk is the person who stops drinking but doesn't actually deal with the issues that cause the drinking.
Yes.
So that can happen, and you can have this kind of willpower and hardness to food where you're weighing and measuring and you're strict or you just, restrict. Um, but to me, that's not freedom. Some people do find freedom in it because they can't find their way out
Yeah.
any other way, right? But I want to tell you that you are stronger than sugar. You can find a way out, that there is a way out and that it's absolutely worth getting handled. Whether you approach me or someone else that you resonate with, understand more. I would like to say know that it can be done, that even if you failed many times in the past, I don't care. I know you can actually do this with the right tools and accountability. That's one of the things that is really helpful than trying to do it alone. Uh, in AA, they say you can't get, sober without God. I've seen people do it, so I know it's not true, but I will say it's much easier if you rely on not just your, who you or what you identify as our creator, and that which is bigger than us, but to do it in a group of like-minded people who are there to hold you accountable, to support you, to, love on you, and to be that place where you get to work out the practical stuff of how you actually change, not just what you think, how you feel, and how you relate to food, our body, and the planet, and one another.
And in your program, when people sign up and pay you the fee, do they get access to the tools just for the duration of that course or?
Yeah, it's a really shitty business model, Esther, but they get lifetime access.
Yay!
Yeah. And they don't get charged if they go through the program again. Once you're in, you're in. You can download the tools. Obviously, there's proprietary rights and copyright. So no, you can't sell it. And if you want to teach it, I prefer you go through our program. There's lots of people who've taught my philosophies, not given attribution, written books, in fact, using nature's principle, almost verbatim. Um, and that's my child. I once my child's out into the world, I can't dictate how it's used. But no one will teach this stuff with the same kind of level of heart and the comprehensive aspect to it. But for me, I want the work to get out. I want us to heal. And I know food has a big place in that, in us reclaiming our strength and our power, our sovereignty, and our joy in life.
What a wonderful conversation, Sherry. And for those of you listening, check out the notes because there are tons of links directly to Sherry. And you can participate in the program too, should you wish to transform your life. Sherry, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Esther, for facilitating this conversation. I'm truly honored.
And we're doing this because you matter.